Well, greetings. How be ye on this fine and beautiful day? My friend Andy says hi. He asks me every day if I've said hi to people for him. So today I said hi. If you don't remember, Andy is a man in prison. He'll be there for quite a while. He has repented of his sin and is trying to live a new life. It's actually very hard to live a Christian life in prison. Some say it's easier than living a Christian life on the outside. But in many respects, especially if you have a reputation like Andy for violence, it's very hard because people want to challenge him. So anyway, last week I concluded talking about Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, giving Moses wisdom, saying you need to have other people doing the judging, and then if they can't figure it out, they take it to another level, and if they can't figure it out, they take it to another level, and if they can't figure it out, they take it to another level, and if they can't figure it out, then they come to you. And I think I didn't make it clear how that can really affect us and help us if we understand that lesson. So I'm going to do an addendum to last week's lesson. The wisdom that far too many overlook and or fail to apply in their lives is, I guess I'd call it sharing the load. Sharing the responsibility, sometimes sharing the authority, especially for those in charge of other people. I was a man in my profession who was in charge of groups of people, and I did live by this very principle. I had small groups that worked for me, but I would pick them carefully for each project. I was a consultant. I had to build a new team every time I took a new job. And I would find their strengths, and then I would hire them and let them work in their strengths. And I didn't supervise. If they ran into trouble, they brought it to me. Well, Moses had millions of people, and so this is a much bigger problem. So if you're a boss today, and you're, like the president or vice president or whatever of a big corporation, and you have 10 people that report to you, and each of them have 10 people to report to them, and each of those have 10 people to report to them, and each of those have 10 people to report to them, you got a lot of layers. That's the way it should be done. Unfortunately, far too many bosses they don't do that. Doing that can take away a lot of your stress, gives you more energy. And then when things go wrong, which seems like that happens a lot in life, you'll be available and prepared to deal with those issues. And that's your job as the big boss. It's not to do the daily, sweeping up or picking up trash. I think a big boss should do some of that, but that's not his job. It's too many bosses, in my opinion, and I've worked for some of these, tend not to share anything. They try to make themselves, and one actually told me this, I don't share in what I know because I want to be indispensables to my company. And that was sad to me. I always took the opinion, now he was a permanent employee and I was always a consultant, so I took the opinion that I try and work myself out of a job. If I can make it so that everything's going to run smooth, I've done my job as a consultant. I guess he looked at it differently. Anyway, so we're at Mount Sinai. You can read about this in Exodus 19 to the end of the book, chapter 40, and the whole book of Leviticus 1 through 27. We're not going to cover that all in this lesson. Now, most Christians know that Moses led the Israelites from Egypt to Mount Sinai. I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of things that I don't think you know. Things that I have not been taught. I had to learn for myself. But did you know it was around 3 months after leaving Egypt before they reached Mount Sinai? It isn't like a hop, skip, and a jump, people. 3 months. Pretty close to 3 months. And remember what I've said multiple times, not just in these lessons, but in others. The bigger the group, the longer it takes to get anywhere. And with millions of people, at least you don't have to worry about potty breaks like when you're riding a motorcycle in groups. Those motorcycles will shake everything right out of you. But the Israelites, they didn't have to worry about that, although, I don't know, you have to find a place private in the desert. That was probably hard. Anyway, I digress, as usual. But not only did you have millions of people, but they had no doubt many more animals than people. And the animals would have to be allowed to graze along the way. So it's not like they were carrying 1,000-pound bales of hay with them. So it took 3 months for them to get to Mount Sinai. And when they reached there and camped close, still in the desert of sin, now called the Sinai Desert, Moses went up the mountain to talk to God. And God told him to remind the Israelites about everything he had done for them and that he was in charge of everything, but they were to be his kingdom of priests, a holy nation. Does that remind you of 1 Peter 2:9? Peter told the early Christians and us, you have been chosen to be royal priests, a holy nation. You are, in fact, God's specially chosen people. Isn't that kind of what God said about the Israelites right there? I think so. Gentile Christians, we parallel much of the Old Testament if we study it. Our commandments, our lives, we can see it if we look with our minds open, not closed. Parachutes and minds only work when they're open. Forget what you've been taught? Well, don't forget it. Just put it aside and look at everything with fresh new eyes. Try and figure out exactly what it says. Again, that's why when I write Bible studies, I don't go back and look at my previous studies on that book or whatever. I have them on my computer, but I don't go and look at that. I write a whole new set of notes and studies, and then I go compare it to what I'd previously written, and then I go compare it to others. I try and open my mind to see what's new. But, can you imagine what it would have been like? Millions of people surrounding Mount Sinai. I think they could have surrounded it easily. Try to imagine being in that crowd. That's what I call experiencing the Bible. And I've done this before. Try to imagine yourself as one of those people. Imagine yourself as one of the elders, or if you want, and you're a woman, you might imagine yourself as the wife of one of the elders. Or maybe Aaron's wife, or Moses' wife, or maybe you want to imagine yourself as one of the children. I don't know. One of the elders, yeah. Oh my. Anyway, the people said they would obey God. So Moses went back up the mountain after he'd talked to them there. And God said he'd surround Moses with a dense cloud so the people would know Moses was talking with God. And God gave Moses more instructions for the people. And I'm not going to go into all the laws and instructions. This is about Moses, this series. I'm struggling to keep on focus, well, as much as I do. But Moses talked to God, and then he went back down the mountain to tell the people what they needed to do. And so the people got ready for the third day there, and on that third day, there was a thick cloud over the mountain with thunder and lightning. Smoke was flowing up out of a fire. There was the presence of God right there on the mountain. The people were terrified, but Moses led them to the base of the mountain. And Moses spoke, and God answered. It doesn't tell us, did the people hear God answer? Well, anyway, God told Moses to go to the top of the mountain. And then God told him to go back down and tell the people not to push their way into the cloud to try and see God. Because if they tried, they would die. And God said, and when you come back up, bring Aaron. So he went up the mountain. God says, get back down there, and then come back. So I want to talk about Mount Sinai for a moment. Things I bet you've never been told. Moses went to the top of Mount Sinai 7 or 8 times. Nobody's quite sure, and maybe he didn't go all the way up on some of those. I'm going to say 7 times. I've done my own counting. I'm not going to argue if somebody says 8 times. The Bible doesn't give us exacts on at least one instance. But I want you to think about this. The base of Mount Sinai is around 1,500 feet above sea level. And Moses had to climb to the top? How high was that? What do you think? 1,000 feet maybe? Oh, we're not talking a Wisconsin mountain, which is more like a molehill. 3,000 feet. No, not like the Appalachians, people. The top of Mount Sinai was 7,500 feet above sea level. If you can't do the math, that's 6,000 feet from the base to the top. Moses is over 80 years old now. Probably 81. No, we're pretty sure of that one. And the mountain is made of granite. And it's not an extreme climb, but it's not an easy climb. And the rocks tend to have sharp edges, if you know granite. And in Moses' day, it's unlikely there were paths up the mountain. That's what tourists want. There is not much vegetation on the mountain. So in Moses' day, there just wasn't a lot of reason for people to go up the mountain. You get paths when people go up the mountain. So Moses was evidently trying to find his own way up. I do hope God was giving him some pointers. But does that make you wonder what Moses was doing there when he encountered the burning bush on Mount Sinai? Did you think about that? My best guess? One of the sheep, or maybe a small group of them, had wandered away. Moses went to find them. What do you think? I mean, when we see pictures of Moses in the burning bush or hear stories about it, nobody ever talks about why he's there, or if there were sheep up there or what. It's just Moses was at the burning bush. I always wonder about things. You know that. So anyway, that means each time this 80-year-old man went up the mountain to talk to God, he claimed, if he went all the way to the top, 6,000 feet. And there was no highway. With modern trails, they say it takes about 6 hours for the average person to climb to the top. And that's on paths. Some steps part of the way that are cut out. So it most probably took Moses at least 8 or 10 hours to climb all the way up. And coming down, you don't go any faster. If anything, you go slower. Because if you have never come down a steep mountainside, if you start going too fast coming down, it's hard to stop. You get in trouble. Are you impressed with Moses climbing 6,000 feet? 7, maybe 8 times? Did you ever even think about Moses climbing more than a mile straight up? Anyway, so while Moses was on the mountaintop and God's fire and clouds kept everyone else away from the mountain, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, just speaking and teaching. This wasn't the 10 Commandment tablets. And when Moses came down from the mountain, the people told Moses to tell him what God said, because if God spoke to them, they believed they would die, so they wanted to hear what God told Moses. And Moses told him, don't worry. God is here to test you and impress you, so you will fear him and not sin. So the people stayed a distance away from the mountain, and Moses went back to talk to God. Now, I gotta admit here, only once does the Bible say God told Moses to go to the top. Do you think the rest of his visits with God were lower down on the mountain? I don't know. Like, we're going to get to a story here in a little bit where some elders and such went up with him, and they stopped part way up. I think they went up 2,000 feet, and then Moses went up 2,000 more. Stop at 4,000. I don't know. Again, the Bible does not give details. The Bible teaches lessons. So we can only speculate about some of the historical facts. So anyway, God gave Moses some more instructions, lots of instructions, lots of laws. You can read about those in Exodus 20 through 23. That passage ends with God's promise to send his angel ahead of them to guard them and guide them. God instructed the Israelites to destroy all the false gods and altars of the people they would conquer, and God promised to make all of their enemies afraid of them. Now, no doubt that would have been easy to do. Remember why Moses' father-in-law came to visit? It was mostly because of how they became free from Egypt. That was shocking. And word had no doubt spread. I think other people groups would have been frightened by these millions of people that got out of Egypt, who was the biggest power in the world at that time. And God said he would not wipe out their enemies in 1 year. Why? Did you know that was in the Bible? God said if he wiped out all their enemies too early, the wild animals would multiply so rapidly that they would not be able to deal with all the animals. Bet that's one of those you never heard unless you've been reading real careful. If you have, more power to you. I'm impressed. Another piece of trivia. It was in this passage that God specified the borders of Israel. Now pay attention and see if the borders match what you believe or what you've been taught. Exodus 23:31, God said that the region from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, from the desert at the southern end to the Euphrates River, would be Israel's. Now I've got maps over here on my screen. On one of them you will see that what the Israelites were promised. And on the other one, I pulled up a map of what Israel had conquered before Joshua died. They didn't get everything God had promised. Something to think about. And how about a little titillation here? Yeah. Translators try to camouflage many of the passages that contain sexually suggestive statements, but this is one they couldn't hide. So what did the people of those days wear under their robes? Like the Irish, what do they wear under their kilts? The answer is they didn't wear anything under their robes. And we know that because Exodus 20:26, God told Moses that no one was to go up to his altar on steps because that would expose their genitals to God's altar. Our translators sanitized that as much as possible. I unsanitized much of it, but it's the Bible. I believe in speaking what the Bible says, not what the translators want you to hear. There are other passages that are much worse, and the translators really had to sanitize those. We'll get to them someday, if you stick with me. So anyway, God summoned Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu and 70 elders of Israel to come up the mountain. But only Moses could go all the way up to God's presence. The others were to worship God. The number 70 there, I mean, it seems like some kind of holy number. They say 70 Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek. We call it the Septuagint because it was 70. That's the Greek word for 70. But most scholars believe there were 72, but it's still called the Septuagint. 70 elders. If you have 72 elders, that'd be 6 per tribe. Maybe Moses and Aaron were the leaders of the tribe of Levi. That makes 72. I don't know. It's just an interesting side thought. But as Moses led Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders up, only Moses was allowed to go all the way up to God's presence. The others were there to worship God. And oh wait, who were Nadab and Abihu? A lot of Christians have heard this story and remember it, but some of you might not. If you're a serious Bible student, been paying attention as you wander through the life of Moses, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Nadab and Abihu were the sons of Aaron. And they were killed by God for serving at the altar but not doing it according to what God had said. A very simple, little, almost insignificant thing, but God expects obedience. Total obedience, not doing things your way. Read Leviticus 10 for their story. Here's the thing. You have to obey the Bible. Every rule, law, command. It's not about what you think it should say. It's not about what you want it to say. It's about what God wants it to say. That's why I take Bible study so seriously. Pay attention, though, because Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders say God saw God. And they say under God's feet was a pavement of lapis lazuli, which is a gemstone. Probably the ones they saw came from Afghanistan, nearest place we know of to Israel. And that the lapis lazuli was as bright blue as the sky. And I don't mean a cloudy sky, I mean a clear sky. At noon, that beautiful blue sky. So anyway, Moses took Joshua. Wait, it says here that Joshua was Moses' assistant. It's the first time the Bible tells us that. Moses took Joshua and told the others to remain on the mountain while they went higher. They stayed up there for 40 days and nights, and God gave Moses instructions regarding a great many things. 40 days, 40 nights. Moses had a lot of talking, and I bet God did most of it, with Moses asking a few questions. But I don't think when God speaks, I don't think he leaves room for questions. You know what I mean? I think he probably says everything very clear, straightforward, is what you need. And I don't think he leaves any holes. That's just me. What do you think? But anyway, one of the things that stood out as I read through those chapters that I never really paid attention to before, but this was during that conversation in these 40 days. This was the first time God said Aaron and his sons would be priests. Now, he didn't say their lineage would be priests. He just said they would be. I found that interesting. And in this case, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments written with his own hand on stone tablets on 2 sides. God wrote on both sides those stone tablets. You don't see that in the movies, do you? Charlton Heston, he didn't have writing on both sides. He just crashed down the tablets with one side. Anyway, So it appears that Joshua was up there for 40 days. The Bible doesn't specifically say that, but he went up with Moses in Exodus 24:13. And in a little bit, we're going to see that when things happen, Joshua greets Moses as Moses comes out of God's presence. So he was evidently up there. And just a piece of trivia. Did you know how long the Israelites camped at Mount Sinai? A few days, a week, a couple weeks, a month? Would you believe 10 months? Yeah. Did you know that? So anyway, going back to Aaron and his sons and the elders, evidently they went back down to the people at some point during those 40 days that Moses and Joshua were on top of the mountain. And I say that because the Bible tells us the people went to Aaron and said they didn't know what had happened to Moses. Remember, Moses was 80 years old when he returned to Egypt, so nobody really knew him. He grew up in the Pharaoh's court. The Israelites didn't know him, and now they pointed that out. And they said, we don't know how long, I'm reading the Bible. We don't know how long the people harassed Aaron. But eventually he told them to bring home all their gold earrings from their wives, sons, and daughters. Gold earrings, wives, sons, daughters. Doesn't mention their own. Anyway, Aaron melted down all that gold and made a gold idol shaped like a calf. Interestingly, it does appear that Aaron did not do this alone, because after the calf was created, the Bible said, they said to the people, these are your gods, Israel. They brought you out of Egypt. And they told the Israelites, the Hebrew text there used the plural word they. I verified that with 7 different texts. They all agree. It's the plural word, not just Aaron told the people. A few English translations say that. Aaron told the people. It was they told the people the gold calf was their god. So Aaron continued by building an altar in front of the gold calf and said there would be a festival to honor their god the next day. I got to admit, it's hard for me to imagine Aaron doing all this. After all, he'd been right there with Moses as God inflicted the Egyptians with the plagues. He saw the hand of God at work. Miraculous work. What do you think happened to Aaron? I don't know, but God didn't strike him dead, so God still had use for him. But that was when God, that's going on down here. Moses up here, and God tells Moses what the Israelites are doing, and he said, I'm going to kill all the Israelites and start over with you as the father of a new nation. Moses pleaded with God and persuaded God to relent. He made a good argument. You can read it in Exodus 32:11-13. Not very long, but it was very, very persuasive. And so God kind of said, okay. And Moses rushed down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments. And this is actually where we're told that God had written on both sides of them. I mentioned that earlier, but this is where the Bible tells us that. So Joshua must have been waiting a little ways away from God and Moses, because when he saw Moses, he told Moses that it sounded like a war down below. And Moses told him that it was not shouts of victory or defeat, but it was singing. And when Moses reached the camp and saw the calf God had told him about, he saw the people dancing, became so angry he threw the 2 tablets down and shattered them. Remember, the rocks on the mountain were granite. They'd shatter anything. Then Moses took the calf, he ground it into powder, scattered it on in the water, and made the Israelites drink that water. But he wasn't done yet. he went to Aaron and asked, "What did the people do to you? How could you participate in such a grievous sin?" So Aaron did what most people do. Well, what Americans are so good at doing. He lied. I have people that come to me and say, "I have trouble with lying. You talk about not lying all the time, but it's so hard for me to not lie. I lie for no reason." And a lot of people have that complaint about themselves. They say they lie for no reason. If you're one of those people, you can stop. It's just not easy. But anyway, Moses, that's not my notes. That's a freebie. I'm almost done. I know that's 30 minutes, but I'm almost done. Moses said, "Come on, man." Or Aaron said to Moses, "Come on, man. Don't go postal. You know these people tend to do evil." Just like Aaron. "They wanted me to make gods for them because they didn't know what happened to you." And are you ready for Aaron's defense? It's going to be good. The great finale of Aaron's defense. "They didn't know what happened to you, so they wanted me to make gods. I told the people give all their gold jewelry to me, and I took all the gold jewelry and I threw it into a fire, and this calf came out of the fire." I don't know how you would have responded, but I think if I was Moses, I might have responded like something like, "Really, Aaron? Did the calf walk out of the fire? Or did it dance out? Or maybe it flew up to the sun when it came out and then it came back here. Do you think I'm a fool?" Sarcasm works sometimes. I'm told by my family I use it too much, and they're probably right. So anyway, Moses stood at the entrance to the camp after he confronted Aaron, and he said, "Everyone on God's side, come here now." The Levites rushed to Moses, and he told them, "Take your sword and go from one end of the camp to the other. Kill your brother, your friend, your neighbor." And the Levites did exactly that and killed 3,000 men that day. Now, that seems like a lot, but considering the size of the nation, 3,000, not that many. Oh, tragic. But that's about 0.0006% of the people. That's 6/10,000ths of the people. Anyway, Moses told the Levites that by responding and obeying, even to the point of killing their own sons and brothers, God would bless them, and they would be designated with a very special status. Did you know that's how the Levites became the temple servants with special privileges? Eventually, it started right here. So the next morning, Moses addressed the Israelites and told them they had committed a horrible sin. And he was going to go see God, try to make things right. Moses pleaded with God and even offered his own eternal soul if God would forgive his people. Now that's the purest love imaginable. You know, when Paul was writing to the Romans in Romans 9, verses 2 and 3, I think he was thinking about this passage when Moses offered that, because Paul said, "My heart hurts deeply and consistently for my fellow Jews. I sincerely wish that I could suffer eternal death for them." Wow, what great love. Moses offered that, and God said, "That's not going to happen. But those who sinned against me will suffer eternal death. Now go, lead the people to where I've told you. My angel will lead you. When the time for punishment comes, they will be punished." Do you think some of the people were innocent? I don't think so, because no adults that left Egypt went into the promised land. That's what we're told. Or at least no adult males. Not sure about the females. Anyway, to make his point, God sent a plague on the Israelites right then. Thanks for bearing with me. Nobody ever does it, but it'd be nice if you made a post that says, I even listened to the end of this lesson. You take care. God bless you. Bye now.